how that helps peace.
Please do, especially Medellin, that was a city that was troubled by a lot of
Yes.
crime and
Yeah.
delictive organizations, drug dealing, and so on. And then through all this artistic rebranding of the city, but not also rebranding, reshaping of its very, very soul, it became a complete different place to live in that
Mhm.
now, invites foreigners to visit and fall in love with it. So
Yeah.
absolutely, please do.
It's still very diverse. It still has abject poverty, a lot of
No,
it. But
absolutely.
but there's it's different than it used to be. I mean, we went
Sorry
to
to
we're
interrupt. This
okay.
is Harini. I'm Harini. I'm WAAS admin, and we are live now on WAAS YouTube if you would like to start the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harini. Okay,
Then, yeah, I can start.
please, please,
Good day.
Natalia.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Good day, distinguished speakers, colleagues, and participants. It is a privilege to welcome you to this webinar, Art as a Catalyst for Human Security and Planetary Peace, convened by the World Academy of Art and Science. We gather at the moment of unprecedented global complexity where conflict, ecological instability, technological acceleration, and social fragmentation are no longer separate challenges, but deeply interconnected dynamics shaping the future of humanity. As recognized within the planetary arts movement, these conditions require not only new solutions, but new ways of understanding and experiencing reality itself. This webinar is grounded in a powerful premise that art is not peripheral, not to these challenges, but central to addressing them. Art has the unique capacity to breach what conventional frameworks often leave divided: emotion and cognition, data and meaning, individual experience and collective responsibility. It translates complexity into lived experience and opens pathways toward empathy, coherence, and shared vision. Within the broader vision of the Planetary Arts Initiative, creativity is positioned as a transformative force capable of turning global threats into opportunities for culture, ethical, and systemic renewal, and of fostering a culture of peace grounded in human security and planetary awareness. Today's conversation brings together voices working at the intersection of art, science, culture, and global governance. Together, we will explore how artistic practices can function not only as expression, but as catalysts for new forms of perception, collaboration, and action, essential for building resilient societies and a flourishing planetary future. As a moderator, I invite you to not only to listen, but to engage deeply with ideas, with perspectives, and with the possibilities that emerge when creativity becomes a shared space of transformation. Let us begin. Thank you. And right now, I would like to introduce our speakers, voices whose work expands the role of art from expression to a force shaping perception, education, and planetary awareness. First, I invite Christina Rusnak, our first speaker, and an award-winning composer whose work explores the intersection of place, nature, history, and culture. Her music bridges artistic expression with environmental and social narratives, transforming landscapes and histories into sound. Alongside her creative work, she serves as president of the International Alliance for Women in Music, actively shaping the global contemporary music landscape. Thank you, Christina. We warmly invite you.
Thank you for inviting me. Are you introducing everyone first and then speak, or do you want me to start now?
You can start now.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have a question first and then I could just start?
You
Okay.
yes.
So yeah. So I, I love my work. I'm immersed in my work. I was telling the panel on at the introduction that I am in a cabin in somewhere in Washington, working on a piece called "Women's Rights Are Human Rights," and it really addresses a lot of what we're talking about today. You know, the violence against women, the public and political life, access to justice, and all of that. So I'm working on this cantata about this. And so this is very relevant to not only my personal work, but I'm compelled, I've gotten some grants to write this piece because I think it's important. It's not just, oh, I want to write a pretty piece. What I do is I believe it has relevance and I believe it should have visibility. And I think it's important for creating connections. So again, it's not just a piece for women, it's a piece about women, and it's a piece about women across the world. I did get permission from the United Nations to use their 2014 document. I've also gotten permission from other writers and websites to use their information for this piece. So I think my work is very, very relevant. I'm currently signed a letter yesterday on an ecological advocacy work and connecting how over time in the Western US, how the impact of our colonialization has affected the landscape, some of it positively, some of it negatively, of course, but how has that changed and how can we move forward from there? So again, a lot of my work has a very strong connection to this work that you are doing. And I'm excited to be a part of this panel.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Christina. It was very meaningful and insightful, and your creativity is very important for art, for societies, for our world. Thank you very much. So now I would like to present the other remarkable figure in our webinar series, first meeting, Eric Booth. We are honored to be joined by Eric Booth, widely recognized as the father of the teaching artist profession. His work has shaped the field of arts education globally, bringing artistic practice with community engagement and learning. With decades of experience across institutions such as Juilliard, Lincoln Center, and the Kennedy Center, his perspective is fundamental to understanding how art operates within society as a transformative force. And I am happy to invite you, dear Eric, and to share with us your thoughts and your experience.
Thank you, Natalia. Very nice of you. You could have just said Eric is the oldest living teaching artist.
No.
That's kind of my recognition in the world. And for those joining this webinar, if you're not familiar with the word teaching artist, it's an artist who expands her career to engage directly with communities and schools. So it's an opening up of their artistry for the kind of direct contact where art comes into direct connection with people living in communities. And I entered this field just as it was beginning. I had an arts background myself, kind of a high arts guy, studying to be a Shakespearean actor and being a Broadway actor for years. And I found that I was deriving more creative satisfaction from working with people who were not identified as artists, but if I could tap their artistry, we could go somewhere powerful together. And that's what I've done for the last 50 years and what teaching artists around the world do. I should point out that teaching artists, even if that title is not familiar, artists who work directly with communities and schools have appeared from the soil of every country on earth. There are tens of thousands of active teaching artists around the world, mostly invisible to the public eye, not well connected, but doing extraordinary work of the kind of work, peacemaking work, community building work, interconnective work that this endeavor is all about. I've been fortunate in my 50 years to be able to travel a lot and see teaching artistry in different parts of the world and how local culture shapes different expressions of teaching artistry, but also to become aware of what is universal. When the arts interact directly with people, what happens in any setting in the world? And I think those interactions are the very things that lead to peace, that lead to healthy connectedness in communities. And we can talk about that more in our conversation, but that is the perspective I bring to this conversation today.
Oh, thank you. It's absolutely inspirational, healthy community societies, and your wisdom. Very excited. Thank you very much for your inspirational speech. So I would like to continue our dialogue with my theme. If you allow me, I would like to share with my screen with you because I need some visual implementation presentation for this. One. I hope that you can see my slides. Yes?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So it concerns my research, which I have elaborate right now. I'm elaborating in present time. Before speaking about peace, I would like to, one moment, to ask a fundamental question, because it arises naturally for us. What kind of perception makes peace possible? Then human security is not only negotiated through institutions, policies, or agreements. It is continuously shaped through thoughts, through institutions, but it is shaped through how perceptual awareness, affective states, and relational cognition structure lived experience in real time. So a defining paradox characterized the present condition. Unprecedented informational abundance coexist with declining coherence, expanded connectivity, intensifies fragmentation. Systems capable of processing extreme complexity not now exist, yet the capacities required to inhabit that complexity remains insufficiently developed. Contemporary experience is marked by information without transformation and connection without attunement. This is not merely a political or ecological tension, but a structural condition, a crisis of perception. in environments saturated with signals yet lacking integration, experience loses continuity. Without attunement, coherence cannot emerge. Without coherence, trust collapse. Without trust, sustainable peace becomes structurally unreachable. Within this condition, art ceases to function as supplementary expression and becomes a structural necessity. I'm sorry. It is not decoration or commentary, but a domain in which perceptual organization itself is reconfigured. It preserves complexity without reduction, holds contradiction without premature resolution, and maintains ambiguity as a productive condition of insight. Conventional system thinking, when detached from effective and ethical integration, process descriptive and optimization models without transforming the structures through which reality is experienced. It can map systems, but it doesn't not necessarily alter the conditions of experience within them. Yet peace is not only a systemic outcome, it is conditioned at the level of life awareness. So awareness is therefore not non-neutral. It is shaped by symbolic, affective, and aesthetic structures that determine how reality is constituted in experience. In this sense, art functions as more than cultural production. It operates as a neurocognitive and ethical infrastructure in which meaning, emotion, and experiential framing are continuously co-produced. Neuroscientific research in neuroaesthetics and social neuroscience supports this perspective, showing that aesthetic engagement involves not only information processing but a systemic reorganization of attention, salience, and affective dynamics. Within shared aesthetic environments, partial synchronization may emerge across cognitive, emotional, and in some cases, physiological dimensions, situating art as a mechanism of collective attunement. Art enables complexity to become experientially accessible by translating abstraction into lived experience. This allows the nervous system to integrate rather than fragment under informational load. In this configuration, art functions as an interface between individual cognition and the planetary scale reality, where interdependence becomes directly experienceable rather than conceptually constructed. From this follows a structural shift of ethics. What is not experientially registered cannot inform action. Responsibility emerges only where relational structure becomes accessible within life awareness. What remains outside awareness remains outside care and therefore outside ethical response. So within my work, this is operationalized through sonic DNA, applied neurointerface protocols within a meta-neuroart framework, where science, technology, and art converge into an integrated system for cognition, awareness, and adaptive human experience. The system processes real-time planetary, environmental, and human system datasets, including geophysical, heliophysical, atmospheric, and astronomical signals through a human-in-the-loop AI mediated architecture where artificial intelligence functions as a constrained analytical layer, while selection, structuring, and synthesis remain under human artistic authorship. These inputs are rendered into sound and into sound into cognitive and affective experience. Through neuroacoustic and cognitive interface principles, experiential processing shifts from interpretation to direct engagement, in which data becomes a lived experience that reorganized attention, affective regulation, and internal coherence, including reorientation of focus, increased clarity of decision pathways, and reduction of cognitive emotional noise. Beyond informational processing, these systems operate at deeper level of contemporary human experience, meaning construction under conditions of abundance, cognitive overload, and fragmental attention, identity instability with rapidly shifting contexts, and the disconnection between bodily awareness, experiential grounding, and planetary rhythms. Here, the perceptual field becomes the interface through which coherence, responsibility, and embodiedness within large living systems are reconstituted. So, within this context, neurodiplomatic art is defined as a practical framework for alignment between shared human consciousness and planetary processes, achieved not through control, but through dynamic synchronization, a sovereign unity framework. Within this approach, the double helix framework structures artistic cognition through two inseparable stands. The structure stand grounded in data, mathematics, and planetary signals as objective scaffolding, and the consciousness stand grounded in experimental, interpretive, and relational dimensions of meaning. These strands are not oppositional but co-dependent, forming a living system capable of sensing, adapting, and evolving as an integrated cognitive planetary interface. This indicates a broader epistemic shift from art as expression to art as interface, from communication to cognition, from reflection to active reconfiguration of experiential structure, and thus of the conditions under which human security and peace become possible. Peace is not a interpretative construct. It emerges only when lived awareness expands to render connection visible, where separation previously dominated, when interdependence becomes directly accessible in experience, and when complexity remains coherence rather than collapsing into fear or reduction. This is not solely an artistic domain, but a civilizational threshold. If human security and planetary peace are to be meaningfully addressed, intervention must extend beyond systems and structures toward the transformation of experiential capacity itself. Ultimately, the futures that can be constructed are bounded by the realities that can be experienced. Expanding this capacity is not a cultural enhancement; it is a condition of survival. This is the work of art itself. This is the work of the Neurodiplomatic Arts Network, and this is the work I invite participation in, not as passive observers, but as co-authors of perception, not as consumers of meaning, but as architects of planetary awareness. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. So I need to stop. Thank you
Natalia,
very much.
I have a quick comment of
Yeah.
how fascinating it is to hear another language, another context describing things I know from direct experience. That it's like a whole world opens in terms of using neuroscience and a complexity system structure to describe what is so intimate when one stands in a room working with people in a community. But it is that enormity of the reach from such a huge analytic worldview and feeling it resonate in the tiny specifics of a creative interaction. It's kind of thrilling. So thank you for the huge view that I think I'm going to have to study your slides quite a long time to really get on top of it.
Sorry. Thank you very
No,
much for your opinion. It is invaluable for me. Thank you very much. Yes, it is. I started this methodology recently, and it is developing before our eyes with the participation of our like-minded people, with all who need to who would like to be closer to this new area. Thank you very much. And
I would like to pivot from what Eric just said, and in about 2 minutes, I'd like to give a real life example of what you just explained, but like he said, in a microcosm. One of the best experiences of my life, I was hired by the U.S. Forest Service to write a piece for the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act. So I wrote about Mount Adams, which had had a devastating wildfire in 2012. And I looked at it and I researched it and I decided to do it from the point of view of the mountain, from the point of view of the animals and the plants that lived there. And I went in there with just a short trio. I only had 3 weeks to compose this piece. And I went in there, it's a 5 minute piece, it's a trio. And so I went in there and I'm like, we're going to have a whole concert for 5 minutes. So I decided to do a presentation afterwards, really talk about how I was connecting to the landscape and connecting to the wildfire situation and climate change and all of that. Well, I did it. And then I did different aspects of motives and experiences, how I use the percussion, how I use the flute, etc. And I had this one part where a wood block,
yes,
sounded to represent the hollow trees as they burned so hot. They eliminated, vaporized the inside of the tree. And one woman said, that's exactly how the black-backed woodpecker sounds after a fire. It's the first bird to return. And I had no clue. And I said, well, yeah. So we spent 45 minutes talking about how this music connects to the landscape. There was maybe 100 people there, and how it connects to the landscape and how it connects to our lives. And one woman said, you haven't completely changed my perspective of wilderness. And I thought the forest ranger was going to cry. It was just so rewarding. But that's really what you were talking about in action, So that's just a real life to what Eric was saying, that real life experience. But you pulled it apart and really kind of explained it in a very articulate way. Thank you.
amazing. Thank you, Christina, for your experience, for your opinion. It is absolutely invaluable for us. It is a great idea. I think that if we can use present our practical works, for presenting not as a presentation but with creative works, or maybe other forms of art to support our vision. And after this we can analyze these works. I hope that next time you can present your work, and we will be excited to follow all your ideas in your music, wonderful music. Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much. So I would
Natalia,
like to, I'm
I
sorry.
don't know if it's, I have another example, but if you want to move on, that's fine.
Okay, wonderful. I see, Lorenzo, I would like to give you words.
Ah,
Yeah,
thank you very much, Natalia.
thank you.
Eric, please go with your example, and then later on I can take the floor again. Please go.
Okay, I won't forget, and we'll go right to you. There's one body of work I was able to do that connected both the making of artworks about environmental issues and community work about environmental issues. The soprano Joyce DiDonato did a world tour of a operatic presentation called Eden. And she went to, I think it was 38 cities around the world. And, you know, the ticket prices were really high, and she filled opera houses around the world. And in every city, my organization, ITAC, International Teaching Artist Collaborative, identified a teaching artist in that city to work within an underserved community with a group of kids in exactly what you were talking about, Natalia, creative engagement workshops about a relevant environmental issue in their community. And they created something that was their expression of concern about that environmental issue. And then they went to see the performance with Joyce DiDonato. And in the encore, Joyce brought these young people onto stage to sing a song about the environment that the kids had created. And when we did some research afterwards, the activation of environmental commitment from these young people had gone from 0 to 60. They originally had said they kind of know there's an environmental problem, but it's not their problem. And at the end, they were committed to taking environmental actions with their families, in their community. And it was that power of that connection between making stuff they cared about that was relevant to their lives and their community, and then connecting it to the extraordinary expression of this operatic beauty, a history of concern about nature that actually accomplished the single most important thing, which is changing what people do, changing their understandings, changing their actions. I'll put a link in the chat box to a report that we produced that includes the curriculums that were developed in those different cities around the world. And those are available free to just borrow those curriculums and work with kids anywhere.
Thank you very much, Eric, for that fantastic intervention. And to be honest, it's lovely and heartwarming that you're working on that, and particularly sharing it for free to everyone to know how to create those curriculum later on, keep expanding maybe through different expressions of art that, let's say, positive waves for kids. I actually wanted to steer the conversation a bit towards the discussion stage, conversation stage, when we're going to try to follow some of the key themes that we had for this webinar, but in a conversational manner. Therefore, you can explain us from a theoretical standpoint, or you can just go towards examples of your daily life, your previous work experience, whatever you want to do. That it connects with certain of the key themes, just like narrative art and symbolism, how communicate complex experiences of conflict, trauma, and peace in a way that resembles with people and that moves them. And like just like you said and Natalia mentioned, changes their paradigm and how they see things through art. So in that sense, I do not only want to invite you three to participate and have a lively exchange of opinions, but also I would love to invite our participants that if they want to be part of this discussion of this particular point, and they have something to say, something to share, to please just indicate it here on the question box, because by just raising their hand there or being like, hey, I would like to participate, I can make them panelists for a short moment of time. They can lively engage with us in this conversation, or well, not with us, with you three, because you three are the protagonists of the conversation. So who wants to start? Okay,
I think for
please go.
me, go ahead.
Go,
I think,
Christina. I'm also
okay.
allowing Sandra to participate, and she will become momentarily one of the panelists with us. But please, you go first. The floor is yours.
There are many ways to look at this. Where you look at the narrative and symbolism, of course, for me, I do mostly chamber and orchestral works, but for choral works, I think whether it's instrumental or with words, I think it's about storytelling. Storytelling is really important and about connecting. So the work I'm working on, is about women's rights or human rights and uses the United Nations document, it's very dry. So how to put all those statistics and those dry information in a way that can connect to people and make it relevant. And so I was able to use some source stories, with permission, use some source stories, and then encapsulate some of the readings that I had done and put that into a narrative and said, this is how we connect. But in another way, I also connect with it in storytelling musically, like with this, piece I did for the Wilderness Act. How do I tell the story about the mountain and their experience? And so I've done that many times with a river. And how does the colonialism of settlement in the Western United States, how does that work interface with the indigenous culture and the restoration of our rivers? So how does that work? And so I do that through storytelling musically.
Sandra, please, you have your hand up. Floor is yours.
Okay. I don't know. I don't see myself, but it's okay.
Let me
Thank you
see
so.
if I can activate your video. No, I can't. Only you can.
Okay, I can.
I'm promoting her as a panelist. Give me a minute here. You will rejoin the session. Therefore, you can turn on your
Yeah.
video.
No, it's okay. I can talk only.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation, and it's really kind of like what I experience, and sometimes cannot really put into words. But I'm not calling myself an artist. I'm more curating art. Journalists and communication experts. I've worked with many international organizations, and I've found that in communication, the SDGs, human rights, you name women's rights, arts and culture have been very powerful for ages, probably since human existence. What I really felt like, and you mentioned it, and we've experienced what's happening to people when they interact with art, but I think storytelling is a very component. Of course, there are always artists. They say, I don't want to talk about my art. I want to just like have my art speak for itself. But but just like to make this human connection. I mean, I found this, for example, very powerful. And this is also about the women's issue. In Bonn, there's the oldest women's museum in the world. And actually, there are now about 20 of them. And they had an exhibition of a woman's artist who's basically life work was destroyed during the flooding. I mean, this climate-induced disaster that we experienced here in Europe 5 years ago in a river valley not far from Bonn. And she exhibited the artwork that she saved from the rubbles of her flooded home and workshop in this museum. And this was one of the most touching exhibitions that I've seen there. And for me right now, I mean, joining the planetary arts movement, it's also, I mean, how can we spread this storytelling, this yeah, I mean, her artwork was basically destroyed, covered with mud. So you could also see, how Mother Nature has, taken it down the streams, and I mean, in this flooding, and created something new in a very vicious, But these composition, for example, that you do for human right, a woman's rights, I mean, how I really want to scale our efforts, and then when there's already this network of women's museums around the world, why can we not work with them? So this is my question to you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Christina, please.
Yes, I sent you a note in the chat, Sandra. I was in Cologne last year for a concert, an IWM concert, at the Schnitzen Museum in Cologne, which originated as a women's abbey. And I tried to connect with the museum, and it turned out it was going to be closed on the days that I was going to be there. So I would like to, have further discussion on this, but there's different ways of trying to do this, and I would love to connect with more women's museums. I think sometimes there is some resistance to scheduling additional artworks, but I find that the interdisciplinary aspect of working with visual art and the literary arts and music, putting it all together, it fosters additional points of reference and additional points of connection for people.
Right, and this is something that actually right now we have an exhibition here in Bonn. It's a portrait art exhibition, and we exactly trying. I mean, there's an event going on, and there will be a concert, but it's multi media installations. We brought in young Serbian artists from Belgrade. I mean, there's one who's very I mean, they're all great, but this one guy, Andre, he collected 4,000 bottles, plastic trash, out of the Sava River, and created a floating portrait of an environmental journalist and TV presenter who was raising awareness about plastic river pollution. So it's also kind of like some concept art, and so we're trying to bring this visual artists together with storytelling and then also concert. So I'm totally with you, and again, I'm just like curating this part of the exhibition. I'm so impressed by the young musicians, visual artists, street artists that are doing so great work, in Eastern Europe, and nobody here in Western Europe knows about them. I mean, so this is kind of, again, I mean, I think that's why we really need to communicate and network better what's already existing and amplify what's already happening on the ground. And that's also touching Eric, this artists, they I'm working for this international organizations that are working with artists, in the global south, in India, Bangladesh, South Africa, that they creating some amazing art. I mean, mostly visual art, but also other art in their communities, but they're never recognized. So, yeah.
I believe that question goes to you, Eric.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things I'd like to underscore from Sandra's comments. One is a pressure we all feel about scale, that small, even beautiful, powerful creations, they inspire us, but we're in a code red crisis of the environment at this point. So we have to be considering ways to scale up that impact without watering it down. And a couple of things you mentioned seem to me good practices in that regard. One is the decision, the practice to move it out of only living in arts institutions. When we stay only in arts institutions, we deal to the small percentage of people who are in the art club. And most of them are already committed environmentalists, and it's good to encourage them and give them heart. But the 93% of the public who doesn't go to arts institutions is part of scaling up. So your description of the outdoor creation made of bottles and the engagement with them. That's the second feature that I find is essential if you have the opportunity or even the hope of actually changing people's understandings and actions, is direct engagement. That people need to make stuff they care about, or they need to be in conversation about things others have made. Otherwise, they stay in their heads, their beliefs are confirmed, the experience passes them by. But going back to what Natalia told us, that, I mean, the term she used was aesthetic engagement. If we can aesthetically engage people, both inside our arts institutions and outside our arts institutions, with all the cleverness that artists have, we begin to have a chance to change people's understandings and people's actions.
Thank you very much for your intervention, Eric. I believe that this immediately connects with one of the other points that we had in the key themes of the agenda to discuss, to guide this conversation, that it was that artistic practices support cultural memory and collective healing because they honor diverse experiences and help us to build shared understanding. But I would also like to ask you, Christina and Natalia, and also some of the members of our audience, if they would like to speak, how also art, I believe, it's in a space of confrontation in the sense that it makes us confront elements of our cultural memory and our history that we're maybe not prepared to deal with it. For instance, a long time ago, 7 years ago, while I was doing an exchange in the US, I remember going to the place where Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, that they created a whole museum about it. And it was a whole collection, a beautiful museum of Black American history, where they were, through a fantastic storytelling, just like Christina was saying, guiding us through the whole experience of what it was to be a Black American. And up to a certain point, of course, for me, it felt foreign because I was not American nor Black. But then, in certain elements of modern history, what I felt was how it was connecting with my own experiences as a young Venezuelan university student, and how oppression in any way has the same face, regardless of your nationality, your gender, or your race. So I wanted to ask you how also art can be a space of confrontation for us to look to hard truths that maybe we're not ready, but we still need to see.
Did you want to
Yes,
go first, Talia?
actually.
Yeah, why don't you go first? I'll speak after.
Yeah,
Okay.
please go.
Some thoughts about this. Art is this absolutely unique language without nationalities, borders. We don't need to learn it. We can understand it directly with our soul, with our heart, and in this way, it is so comfortable environment for our natural communication without other conditions, specifics, or some limitations. And here, I hope that we need to create more spaces with this atmosphere where people, especially younger generation, can communicate, co-create something in social for people benefits, where they can transmit through art and realize their emotional tension, maybe some find questions through arts in their creativity, and in their collaboration, and find path to one another. So this is so comfortable and natural way to people to be closer in this world. So especially music, because I am musician, it is absolutely natural way, the simplest way, when we can understand the culture, the traditions of another country, another nationality. And here we only have the colorful space of our diverse and very rich societies in our beautiful world. And of course, creativity without love can be absolutely. When we sometimes we can see the other manifestation of art. Some forms of contemporary art can be absolutely unpleasant or something. We can feel the fear or negative emotions. I think that the true art needs to be enlightenment for us, and it needs to raise the moral and eternal questions and give us answers. In this way, I prefer the cross-cultural, cross-art forms where we can combine the most powerful sides of different kind of arts and achieve the noble missions, noble purposes for giving meaning to our people, to our younger generations and other people in our world,
Thank you,
to
Natalia.
create something very high and wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, Christina, I believe that you wanted to also jump in.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have. Oh, go
okay.
ahead. Go ahead, Christina. Go ahead.
You know, you asked one question, but I really have 3 points, and one directly
Lovely.
answers your question, and that's about things that are difficult. I have a piece I wrote in 2019 on immigration, connecting the old poem that's at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty with the 21st century realities. And I'm having a hard time getting anybody to do it. nobody wants to touch it because it's the whole idea of immigration. And, you know, we are a melting pot. We have benefited from being a melting pot, and all countries do, but there's that old guard, right? But you have to bring these up. You have to have these conversations and try to enable people to see that it's how much of a benefit it is to make those connections and have those dialogues, right? One of the things that I do is I have a presentation that I do, a workshop that I do. It's called Connecting to the Wider World. And it is toward focused to musicians, performers, composers, etc. But it's really designed to help create a lens through which we can choose to perform works and create works that connect with audiences that are socially, environmentally, globally relevant. And so what I'm doing through this workshop is I'm trying to work with composers and performers and saying, hey, we can play a Mozart piece, which is nice, and for Sandra, you know, Beethoven piece, right? But how can we write something, because they wrote things that were relevant to their time. We have an opportunity as artists to be relevant to our time, because 50 years from now, people will, you know, they won't forget about Beethoven, but they'll also be looking back at us and saying, what were we saying about our time, our humanity, and our focus to the world? And so it's about passion and perspective, but it's also about advocacy, and which is one of the reasons we're here. How can we advocate how our art connects with our mission? You know, in this case, it's planetary peace. How can we connect with that? And how can we make a difference? The other point I wanted to make was what I forgot who said it, whether it was Lorenzo or Eric, about getting out of our little bitty arts places. And that says easy, but it does hard. I've given presentations at different alliances, different organizations, but trying to get up in front of, like, you know, the Oregon business community, it's very difficult. So I think that's a challenge for all of us. And I think it's going to take some broader thinking and connection with, and that's why I'm part of the, you know, the Oregon Business Alliance, et cetera, to try to make those connections. And we have to reach out and, you know, help them see how this benefits them. I saw a post on Instagram yesterday. It was for John Hopkins Medical School, and on interview for potential candidates.
Mm-hmm.
It was, have you had choir? Were you in band? Have you had orchestra? Were you in art? Because science shows that when you do these things, when we have artistic backgrounds and artistic practices, it benefits our whole brain and our whole life and our whole perspective. So I think there's a lot of questions here that I cannot really answer yet, but I'm working on it.
Eric,
I'd
let's
like
go.
Great. I have an example that really addresses exactly the challenge you gave us, Lorenzo. But first, a little shout out for teaching artists. Christina, teaching artists are the ones who can get up in front of those business gatherings, who do, in fact, ITAC works as the artistic director for non-arts conferences. We weave creative engagement throughout a business conference or another kind of conference, because that's the skill of teaching artists, to be able to activate the artistry of others and guide it toward important learning. And now that example of where there is resistance and heat and not peaceful relations, one example from a colleague of mine that I'm so admiring of, and I'll put a link in the chat about Michael Rhodes' work. He lives in Montana, which is a conservative state in the US, but not all conservative people. And there's a lot of friction between these polar opposites. And he has undertaken a project called State of Mind, in which he goes to small towns around this state And he will be there for a period of time, like a week, and he will work with the young people to create a play in which they express what they have to say about the controversial issues of their town. And then the people of that town, sometimes as many as 75% of the population, comes to that performance and follows up with a day or two of community conversation about those issues. And because it kicks off with the kids' creative offering, they can then have conversations that would not be possible otherwise because there's too much heat. The entrenched positions are too strong. But once the creative sharing of the young people is in the space, the grown-ups from both sides can work from the offering of the young people to have conversations about those highly politicized issues and begin to create possibilities that did not exist in that town before then. And Michael's project, State of Mind, in which he says listening as a radical practice, that's what he tries to bring to the communities. He has visited 50 of those towns around his state to make it a common practice in that town. And he goes back a year later to further the conversations. And this is how you take an emotionally supercharged town, a situation, a community, and open it up through art making. There's his Substack that describes the work.
Thank you very much, Eric. That's actually fantastic. I only wish that that project could expand to the rest of the US and maybe
Yeah,
go
really.
into another contentious states that are dealing with a lot of polarization right now. If the work can tell us something, is that those sort of initiatives are really needed at this point, not only in the States, but pretty much in the whole wide world, because polarization is becoming an increasingly worrisome issue, which is the reason why we're here today, to try to find alternative creative ways to promote peace. And in that sense, and I just think that you started the final point that we could deal with today, is how to find new frameworks that can reimagine human security and that can put peace up to the center of the discussion. Because according to your example, these contentious issues were always dealing with a rationalized mind that was trying to make sense of things from 2 plus 2 it's equals 4. But the issue is that human experience is not that. You cannot sum it up towards a methodological process. Sure, methodology is important, but then again, when we are dealing with zones full of entrenched conflict, hatred, or previous pain and painful experiences, how we can disarm people, maybe through art, to start seeing things from the opposite point of view. And how we can then prioritize well-being, dignity, and of course coexistence. Because at the end of the day, nobody's expecting that art will make us all friends, but it can be the first stepping stone, you know? Please, Eric, go. I already have
Yeah.
your camera.
Yes, my response. I mean, I think there was a lot of affirmation of that point of view of the whole human needing to show up in Natalia's presentation, which I will need to study more carefully to fully grasp. But we know in the arts, in fact, what I'm forever telling teaching artists know what to do when you don't know what to do. They know how to encounter the unfamiliar. They know how to guide people through ambiguous spaces. And to me, the challenge is going simpler. I think the act that brings people at art anymore, because I think you can make stuff you care about in all kinds of media. Artistic media are particularly eloquent. You're not going to beat music for being able to reach directly into the heart. But not everybody can put their hands on music and make stuff they care about. But there are things throughout their lives, conversation, creating a dinner table, creating a meal together, where they start to make stuff they care about. And that's when new connections, new possibilities arise. And people like at Michael Rhodes' community conversations, they can have a different kind of conversation, a new kind of opportunity to connect opens up on the far side of creative engagement, or as Natalia says, aesthetic engagement. That to me is the door opener. If you can aesthetically engage participants, new possibilities arise. And if you don't open up those aesthetic engagements, you stay stuck in the cerebral positioning that people find comfortable. And so that's where my view of the artistic opportunity is in being able to bring people into aesthetic engagement with others. And that's how we make stuff we care about, like healthy communities.
So if we will have to summarize in a short sentence what you're saying, and allow me to paraphrase you, you will say that then art, it's the act of creating, the act of making, regardless of, and it's also the act of showing up. Because just like you're
Yes.
saying, people, the human just need to show up in this scene and then it starts creating. Regardless of what he or she is thinking or whatever is thinking, just creating. Creating itself doesn't matter if it's music, an improv, a meal. Creating is art.
And I would just add that is not limited to artists. That applies to
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Christina.
I'm just
You're muted.
affirming. I was thinking of other art forms as well. I think we study writing in school, but I think writing is a very creative, art form. It is also a very cathartic art form. It's to the point where his conversations across communities, I think writing a poem, a story, whatever, the acting out of these experiences and how you connect. Sometimes it's easier for children, and Eric, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my observation, for them to play act something that's difficult to confront reality. I think it's easier, but I think all these things can come together and coalesce. So I'm just affirming what you just said, Eric.
And I would just add, it's easier for children up until about age 9. That's when it starts to become self-conscious and more challenging, and kids' confidence in their expressiveness begins to change around puberty.
Interesting. Eric, before we go with Natalia's final input so that we can say bye-bye for today, but maybe we will gather again soon, hopefully, for another conversation. I wanted to ask you on that particular thing that you mentioned, that is self-consciousness. Is how would you deal with self-consciousness in adults?
Uh, the way teaching artists do it, the phrase we use is, you come in under the radar. When I am working with a Rotary Club of business people, I don't use the word art, but I get them creating something small, something interesting to them. And then we start to unpack how they did that, what the power of it is. So I don't use the tripwire word of art, because 93% of people back off. I just sneak them into the playfulness of creative engagement, and then they begin to go with you. They begin to be willing to take a brave next step beyond that. And it's the same with kids. I mean, teenagers are not necessarily willing to quickly be creative with you. You come in under the radar, engage them in making something that's relevant to them, and then they're more willing to follow. So it's a matter of not making people think, oh, now we're in the arts and I suck as an artist, but in fact, let's play, let's create something that's appropriate in a business setting or a scientific setting. And once that energy has started, you can go somewhere together.
Thank you, Eric. Well, Natalia, please give us your final remarks.
Yes.
And
Thank you,
yeah,
Lorenzo.
please go.
About self-consciousness, I can say that conscience and consciousness are very close, and it is interdependent notions, because we need to be honest with ourselves, with other people in our world, and we need to be heart opened to each another with another people. So the great example, of course, children, because they live naturally in this way. They communicate absolutely naturally with each other without borders. They create all the time, they play all the time, and let's be like children in the highest meaning of this understanding. Be we need to find the best way to create something kind, to learn more about each other, about other parts of our world, in general, what we have around us. So I think that it can be achieved, but if we will be closer to each other, and art is the best way for it, because it's from the soul to other soul directly, and we speak with all our a deep understanding the author, which translates something very important meaning to other people. So
Thank you very much,
thank you very much.
Natalia. Well, then I will say, to summarize, that if art is a message of soul to soul, what we should try to strive for is to always keep a childish soul deep down here, to keep ourselves as a child, with the curiosity of a child, with the capacity for wonder that a child
Yes.
has. And that when we do that, we are open to listening to others in a more meaningful way, in order to strive for a more peaceful world. So thank you very much for your time today, Eric, for your time today, Christina, and of course, Natalia, for helping us to make this happen, because you were the one reaching out to this fantastic group of speakers. So in the name of Planetary X Art, I just want to thank all the participants today, all the assistants, the panelists too, and to the great support of the World Academy of Art and Science in the technical side. Thank you very much, Harini. And off we go. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again in another of the webinars that we will have in the webinar series of X Art. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Lorenzo.
your wonderful presence and your wisdom. Thank you, and my best wishes to you and your noble activity. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Goodbye.